Hello again and welcome to another Mordy and Glory, the old world video. In today's episode, we shall be casting our ever critical eye over another old world unit. And once again, we will be traveling to the greatest faction, my favorite one, the Empire of Man. The center of culture, civilization and technology in the world of legend. And it's that last one which is going to be oh so very important today, because we're looking at one of the greatest units ever conceived and one of the best, not just with the Empire, but in my humble opinion, the entire game. It is the Empire Steam Tank. Monstrous ironclad land battleships that crush all before them. What's not to like? And what I'm going to do in today's video is take you through step by step the Steam Tank, its weapons, its war gear, and its abilities. And so without further ado, let's not mess around any further. Let's mount up and charge full steam into today's episode. Let us begin with a cheeky gander at the stat line. Now, the Steam Tank has a split profile, which might look a little confusing to some people who are getting into the game for the first time. But the good news is that essentially it is one combined profile. And so even though the Steam Tank has a movement value and the Engineer doesn't, it's fine. It's one unit, so you use the movement value of the Steam Tank. The Steam Tank itself doesn't have a weapon skill, but when determining how easy it is for the enemy to hit you, you would use the weapon skill of the Engineer. So it's a little bit of back and forth, as it were. So the Steam Tank has a movement of 4, and then for its defensive profile, you have a strength of 6, a toughness of 7, and a wound value of 10. And then for the Engineer side of things, you've got the weapon skill of 3, ballistic skill of 4. There is a strength 3 in there as well, but that's just for the Engineer's like one attack. And that attack is at initiative 3, tax 1, leadership 8. The Steam Tank is classed as a heavy chariot and has a large base size of 60 by 100 millimeters. Its unit size of 1. You can't take squads of these things, even though that would be awesome. Has an armor value of 3+. Now let's just take a moment, step back and look at how damn durable this thing is. This very well may be the toughest unit that I have come across. I'm sure there'll be some combinations, some dragon with a wizard on top with a spell that can beat this, but just as a base profile, just looking at its fundamentals, this thing is super duper tough. It's got a toughness of 7, which is more than a lot of dragons. It's the highest ones that I think I've come across, and 10 wounds with a 3+ save. Oh, baby! This thing ain't going down easy. And in fact, for a lot of factions, dealing with the Steam Tank head on is going to be a real challenge. And the real skill in trying to defeat one won't necessarily be by force of arms, but to use some clever movement blocking shenanigans, some spells to slow it down and to tie it up and all that kind of stuff. So it is a really, really good unit, very, very durable. And if you're fighting against one, don't try and take it head on, unless you've got something particularly vicious and nasty. Best thing you can do is, well, to basically try and take it out of the game using shenanigans. Of course, if you are the controlling Empire player, it is going to be up to you to make that as hard as possible for your opponent and to give your Steam Tank every opportunity to run amok on the battlefield. And it certainly will be able to do that, as you'll see when we get into its special rules and weapons a little bit later on. Long story short, the Steam Tank is tough and taking it down is going to be very hard. But let's move on to its equipment. Steam Tank comes with a steam cannon and a steam gun. The Engineer Commander as standard comes with a hand weapon, but you can upgrade him to have a Hochland long rifle, and you can have pigeon bombs, and you can have a repeater pistol. So what's interesting is it doesn't say the Engineer Commander may take one of the following. You can have all of them if you want. But bear in mind that the Hochland long rifle is 10 points, the pigeon bombs are 20 points, and the repeater pistol is 8 points. I would probably go for one of the 3. And out of those three, I would probably go for the repeater pistol. Out of all these options, I would go with the repeater pistol, or I would take none of them. The Hold and Long Rifle is a good weapon, but it likes to stay still to be any good. It's got cumbersome and ponderous. You start moving with it, it's just not going to hit anything. And you don't really want your steam tank staying still. It's a tank. It runs things over. Get it into combat and start grinding the enemy down. If it's sitting back and shooting, you might as well save a bunch of points and take things like a great cannon. And in a serious game, I would never take the pigeon bombs. They are far too unreliable. They're a really, really cool weapon though, and I actually want to do a separate video going through them and sort of deep diving into them. But for now, just understand that most of the time, they don't do anything. You roll on a table, and on a 6, something happens. On a 1 to 5, very little happens. So 20 points for something that's not often going to go off is a little bit of a meme, but it is a very fun weapon. So like I said, we'll look at it in more detail in a different video. The repeater pistol, on the other hand, is very cheap at only 8 points. It's short range, which is fine because most of the steam tank weapons are short range when you look at the steam gun and stuff. And it doesn't mind about moving and shooting. And thanks to the engineer having a base ballistic skill of 4+, you can actually reliably use the multiple shots 3 to get a decent amount of DACA out of this thing. But again, considering that most of the time your Empire steam tank wants to be crashing into enemy units, you'll probably find that the repeater pistol is nice. It's a decent upgrade to have, but once you're in combat, you may not be using it all that much. And considering that you charge at the beginning of the turn, once your steam tank sort of got up there, it's going to crash into your unit, hopefully break it, and then beginning of your next turn, you're going to be charging again, or the enemy's going to countercharge you. So you're going to be in combat a lot of the time. So I find that the shooting of the steam tank is decent, it's okay, but don't feel like you need to take any of these 3 upgrades. But now we get to the special rules, and the steam tank has, as you would expect for such a rare and wacky and wonderful unit, quite a lot of them. Firstly, we've got close order. This is actually really good. It just gives you +1 combat resolution. Steam tank doesn't put out a huge amount of attacks, and there are going to be some units which will be able to build up enough static combat res to be able to survive the combat. But if you have close order, you might just have that one cheeky extra pip of combat resolution that allows you to break an enemy unit. The steam tank is also immune to psychology, which is fairly understandable. If you're a crewman inside this thing, sure, you're probably quite cramped and hot, but you're not going to be too worried about some skeletons trying to scare you. Fear, terror, panic, anything like that does not apply to the steam tank. It also has impact hits, D6 +1 of them in fact. This is a little swingy. I would have preferred maybe D3 +3 or 2D3, something like that. D6 +1 does make it somewhat unreliable. But hey, they are impact hits. They're kind of free extra damage you can do when you crash into an enemy unit. The steam tank also has the large target special rule, which is a little bit of a debuff. It does mean things like cannonballs stop and don't bounce through you, but it also means that you can be targeted even if the enemy wouldn't normally have true line of sight to you, for example, shooting through their own units. So it does make you a little bit more susceptible to their shooting. And then we've got the stomp attacks, and these are actually the principal way that the steam tank is going to do damage. If you look at its profile, it doesn't actually have any attacks of its own, apart from that engineer who's trying to slap you maybe with his pipe. D3 +1 stomp attacks isn't a huge amount of attacks. And so you'll find that the Empire steam tank isn't going to smash in and cut down entire ranks of enemies, but rather it's going to crash in there with some impact hits, do some stomp attacks, and then either break the enemy or just sit there grinding it out, because it is also unbreakable. Finally, it causes terror. This is very important. Old World is a game all about morale. If you're a player that's coming over to this game from 40k, where morale often means very, very little and doesn't really have a huge impact on the game, it's the complete opposite in Old World. Leadership, panic, morale checks, all of that stuff is game changing, and a bad leadership test here and there can spell doom for a game or an army. And terror is a rule that really impacts leadership. You can break units before you even have to fight them, just because of how scary your is. And so the steam tank having this is, I think it's one of the only units in the Empire that has it. There may be others, like some of the big monsters, maybe Griffins have it as well, but it definitely is a big deal having Terror, because it really plays into the whole leadership-centric mechanics of the old world. Now that just about covers the generic special rules of the steam tank, but it has a whole bunch of unique specific ones to its unit entry. We've got grinding wheels, steam power, and temperamental, and we'll take a look at those now. Grinding wheels is a buff to your stomp attacks. The armored bulk of a steam tank weighs many tons, and any enemies unfortunate enough to fall beneath its metal-bound wheels are crushed to paste. Stomp attacks made by a steam tank have an armor-piercing characteristic of -2. However, this rule cannot be used against models whose troop type is behemoth. They are simply too large to be caught beneath a steam tank's wheels. In addition, and unlike other chariots, this model treats low linear obstacles as open terrain rather than as impassable terrain. Having the ability to get through low linear obstacles with a chariot is a big deal. Terrain is always very impactful in game systems, and having a steam tank just smash through it is awesome. But the big thing here about grinding wheels is it kind of points your steam tank in a certain direction. If you send this into enemy monsters, it's not going to do a whole amount. D3+1 attacks essentially, as it just tries to like bump into them. What you want your steam tank to do is bully enemy units, enemy infantry units, anything that isn't a monster. Imagine the following: your opponent has a big unit of chosen warriors of some kind, is elite infantry, maybe it is actual chosen, maybe there's some warriors of chaos in there, maybe there are some elite elven phoenix guards, something like that, and there's a lot of points in that unit, but there isn't a huge amount of anti-monster in that unit. Maybe they're protecting a wizard or something like that. Well, your steam tank can slam into that unit and just start grinding away, bullying them, breaking them. It doesn't even need to be something that's overly elite. If there's just a big block of enemy infantry, someone's taken, say, 30 or 40 peasants in a unit, or they've gone for just lots of orc boys, you are going to win that fight. You're going to smash in, and you are going to start impacting them, and you're going to start stomping them, and you are going to have lots of AP to cut through them, and they're going to do no damage to you, so you won't need to worry about static combat res, you'll just overrun them. And if you catch them, then that is potentially hundreds of points that your steam tank has essentially bullied off the board and towards your side of winning the battle. I had a game recently where my steam tank went down the flank and just crashed into a huge unit of savage orcs. And these orcs were something that I wouldn't have been able to deal with my state troops. I would have just been cut down and broken before I had a chance. But by sending my steam tank down there, not only did I secure that flank and make sure that I could concentrate on the center, but also meant that the orcs were completely routed from the field. That flank was secure, and my opponent said to me afterwards, well, I just wanted to, take your steam tank out of the game so it's down there not doing other stuff. And that's true, its terror aura could have been a big deal, but that was a 200-300 point unit of orcs that just got chased away. I'm totally okay with my steam tank just doing that for the game, because that's 300 victory points for me, and that is now my flank secured. I was able to bully that unit off. And that's what I really feel you want your steam tank to be doing. Don't be trying to get into monster versus monster battle with it. That's not what it's for. That's what your Empire General and a big old two-headed Imperial Griffin wants to be doing. Your steam tank wants to be bullying. Moving on, the next unique ability of the steam tank is steam power. Whilst the steam tank is capable of great speed, the fires that heat its borders require constant stoking. Should the stamina of the crew falter, its thunderous pace can be reduced to a crawl. A steam tank cannot march. Instead, you may make a steam power roll and add the result to the model's movement characteristic. To make a steam power roll, roll 2d6 and discard the lowest result. The highest result is the result of the steam power roll. If both dice roll the same result, discard either. So basically, you move 4 plus d6 inches. Or should I say, 4 plus 2d6, picking the highest inches. I have to admit, this rule seems like a really big debuff to me, and I'm not a fan of it at all. It seems like you have all of the disadvantages of random movement, but none of the advantages. The reason why you have the disadvantages of random movement is because you still technically move and make a charge roll, but you just don't know how far you're going to go. You're not going to guaranteed 8 inches when you march. But when you do charge, because it is officially a charge roll and then you do the steam power, your opponent can react how they want. They can flee, they can stand and shoot. But if you've got random movement, let's say like on a squig hopper, then the enemy's only choice is to hold because it's random movement. So you don't get to move how you want, and yet you don't have the advantages of random movement. It's just all debuffs all the way as far as I can tell. In a similar vein, we have got the temperamental special rule. The inner workings of a steam tank are extremely experimental, temperamental and dangerous, and the crew must constantly monitor the gurgling and hissing from boilers and pipes and heed the clouds of vapor that accumulate around them. A moment of inattention can lead to irreparable damage and in extreme cases, boiled crew. If a natural 1 is rolled on either of the dice when the steam tank makes a steam power roll or a charge roll, the pressure has reached dangerous levels and if not quickly released, will cause irreparable damage. Choose one of the following. Bang! The crew ignores the building pressure, which inevitably finds its own release. The steam tank loses a single wound. I don't know how to say this next one. Whee! That's literally what it says in the book. PHWEEE! Exclamation mark. Amidst billowing clouds of steam and an ear-splitting whistle, the pressure is released, rendering the steam tank immobile. The steam tank halts immediately and cannot move again for the remainder of this turn. So basically, when you're rolling your 2d6 for your steam power, if you roll a 1, then you can choose to take a wound but make your normal move, charge, just go for it. Or you can be like, I'm not going to move. Instead, I'm just going to let the steam out and take no damage whatsoever. So a little bit of risk and reward. Considering the steam tank has 10 wounds and is really, really tough, most people I think are going to go for bang. But if you are getting towards the low end of your wound count, maybe you've only got 1 or 2 left, it might be worth instead going for flee, so you don't end up killing or almost killing your steam tank. However, if a natural roll of 1 is done on both dice, the pressure is too great to be released safely. The steam tank loses a single wound and halts immediately. It cannot move again for the remainder of this turn. So if you roll a double 1, you have no choice. You are staying still. You are essentially going free, and you do lose a wound as well. It's the worst of both worlds, essentially. So that covers all of the steam tank special rules, and overall, they're pretty good. Sure, steam power and temperamental are a bit of a pisser, but the fact that you get extra AP on your stomps, the fact that you have close order, your immune psychology, you get potentially up to 7 impact hits, and you get stomp attacks on top of that, and your terror, and you're unbreakable. I think if you didn't have, even though I'm not a fan of steam power and stuff, I think if you didn't have steam power and if you didn't have temperamental, then the unit would be really, really good. But I have to say, I would happily change out steam power for full-blown random movement. But I guess you can't have one without the other because the steam power feeds into the temperamental rule. But it's not just unique rules that the steam tank has, it's also got some pretty unique war gear and weapons as well. It's not just an engineer sticking out the top with a repeater pistol or throwing pigeons at people. You do have the steam cannon and the steam gun. Steam tanks are armed with a steam-powered cannon that can send a spinning ball of iron whirling into the foe's ranks with all the power of a traditional black powder cannon. Steam cannon has a range of 24 inches at strength 8, AP -2. It's armor bane 2, cannon fire, cumbersome, and multiple wounds D3. Notes: this weapon shoots like a cannon using the cannon fire special rule. If a misfire is rolled on the artillery dice during step 2, this model loses a single wound instead of rolling on the misfire table. So there's no risk of, like with your great cannon, rolling the misfire and your whole steam tank blowing up. If you do misfire with steam cannon, all that happens is you take a single wound. I have to say, overall, I'm a big fan of the steam cannon. More cannons in your Empire army, the better. And sure, it's not a great cannon, but it's not like to blow itself up like I find great cannons like to do. 2400 range might seem kind of short, but remember, this is cannon fire, so you don't need to really worry about long range impacting your ballistic skill because you don't really use that, and you are going to be moving forward with the steam tank anyway, trying to crash into enemy units with it. It's just a nice way of being able to sling a cannonball in, maybe take a few ranks out from one of those units you're trying to bully, reducing their static combat res by a little bit. And hey, if you do come across a big monster, sure, your steam tank does want to try and run it over, but potentially between the impact hits and a cheeky steam cannonball or two, you might actually be able to go head on one of these things as long as you can set yourself up for it. Finally, even if it's not the instinctive way, maybe even the recommended way of using a steam tank, if you find yourself in a battlefield situation where moving towards the enemy really isn't advisable, they're going to be coming to you and you need as many turns as possible to weaken them and shoot them up a little bit, for example, if you're facing off against Chaos Warriors, then having a steam cannon does give you that extra bit of artillery fire to soften the enemy up, and then the steam tank can go in, and hopefully that will swing the game in your favor. But this is the old world, and so games are going to be decided in combat more than anything else, and people are going to get up close and personal, and this is where the steam gun comes in. Steam tanks are also fitted with a turret-mounted steam gun as standard. Connected to the boiler, this weapon can engulf nearby enemies in great gouts of scalding steam. Steam gun has no range because you use the breath template, and it's only strength 2, and it doesn't have any AP, so it looks like it's kind of crappy, but no armor saves are permitted against wounds caused by this weapon. Ward and regen saves can be attempted as normal. Now, strength 2 is frustrating because it would be quite nice for it to be able to wound orcs not on 6s. We put it like that. Orcs are very, very common. In fact, T4 is probably more common than toughness 3 in the old world. It does mean that a lot of the time you will be wounding the enemy on 6s, and at best it's probably going to be 5s. And if you come across something that's toughness 2, then the steam tank is... We're talking about bullying units. That's going to be abuse at that level. But the steam gun is able to, I find, just broil a couple of enemies, 2 or 3 enemies from a unit. Even if you get a really good blast on it, with it being strength 2, it's not a weapon that's going to take out loads of enemies, but it's certainly a weapon that you can put into the enemy and get a decent amount of wounds. And again, if it just chips a rank off, takes a bit of extra combat res out of there, that's all right. So now that we've looked at the steam tank in its detail, looking at all the different special rules and everything, let's zoom out and look at the big picture. What is this thing like on the tabletop, and how does it compare to some rare choices, and what can it actually bring to your army? On the tabletop, I have become a big fan of the steam tank. I really, really like it. Not only is the model super cool, it's very unique. It's one of the few monsters that Empire can get. We don't get big dragons, if we get like tanks, which is really, really cool. But not only that, if you're a traditional Empire player like myself, when I say that, you're someone that likes infantry, you like your state troops being able to hold the line and all this kind of stuff, you're going to want a steam tank. And that's because I have found that, ironically, even though the imagery and the lore around the Empire is their troops can hold and they're well disciplined and everything, they're not actually all that good at doing it. And you can try and grind away, but more often than not, your Empire troops get ground down and then broken, which is not ideal to say the least. But I have started including a steam tank, and after a couple of games with this thing, it's really helped me realize that playstyle. One of the big problems that I was having is my flanks were kind of collapsing first, and then the center would start getting flanked in the sides, and then everything just started falling apart. But having something just unmovable, unbreakable, literally on your flank, really allows you to start charging up there, driving away those enemies that might be trying to turn a flank and trying to cause your center to collapse and all that kind of stuff. You can sort of just secure it, and then you can just focus on what's in front of you. And so I'm a big fan of the steam tank because it actually allows, I feel, fluffy Empire armies kind of play fluffy, because the meta for Empire right now is kind of developing along these lines of cavalry for your core, demigods for your special, and some artillery. But that's not how a lot of people want to play Empire. And there's nothing wrong with that playstyle, by the way. If you go into a competition, you want to play competitively. But if you're wanting to play Empire as not Empire, then I think the steam tank's a really good way of allowing you to do that. The big issue I have with it is that it kind of competes with Flagellants. I really wish I could run 2 steam tanks, but I can't at 2,000 points because it's 265 points. And if I was to do that, I'd need it to be 250 points. So I want 2 unbreakable units. And unfortunately, if I go for a steam tank, that kind of limits how many Flagellants I can get, because Flagellants are 13 points a model. And I really want like 20 of them because they've got no armor. They've got like a bit of a feel no pain, but feel no pain is basically a ward save, but they've got no armor. And so I think if you go for like a steam tank, even if you don't put any upgrades on your Flagellant, you can't quite get 20 of them. I think the most you can get is 17 or 18 of them. And if you do your steam tank on one side and you block a Flagellant the other, sure, your flank's going to be secure, but then guess what you're missing out on? The Hellblaster volley gun. And that's a really, really good unit, especially if you've got like a hill in your deployment zone. A lot of people are focused on cannons right now, but I think the Hellblaster is actually the sneaky top artillery piece of the Empire, because cannons, well, they feel like they're killing like 2 or 3 models at a time, and that can be kind of rough. Hellblasters, sure, they got a roll to hit and everything, but you got an engineer nearby. That's not an issue whatsoever. Long story short, steam tank's great, but so is everything else in the rare section, and it can be really difficult to know which one you want to go for when you want all of them. In summary, steam tank is a pricey unit, but it is worth every single penny. It's really tough and really durable and very sticky. It will hold a flank single-handedly, and only the most powerful of enemy units are going to have a chance to bring it down in short order. You can use it to anchor a flank, or you can use it to spearhead an assault, but whatever you want to use steam tank for, it should be able to accommodate. Not only is it very durable, it's also got really good offensive output. Between the impact hits, the stomp attacks, potentially a repeater pistol, and the steam cannon and the steam gun, you've got enough damage output that this thing is not only going to be able to take a punch, it's going to be giving one as well. The only real issue you're going to have with the steam tank is its movement is a little bit wacky, and more often than not, you're going to want to take it and everything else in your rare section, and you're going to have to make some tough choices on what you want to include in your army. Well, at least that's what I think. But of course, all of this is just like my opinion, man. Let me know what you think down in the comment section below. Are you a fan of the steam tank, or are there other units in the Empire that you think are even better than this ironclad behemoth? If you enjoyed today's video, don't forget to smash that like button and also subscribe to never miss an episode. Would you like to know more? If so, then please consider becoming a channel member or patron. By supporting the channel, not only will you be doing your part, but you'll also be helping me create more content for your viewing pleasure and unlocking a whole host of perks. You get everything from a badge next to your name, custom emojis, but the big one is access to the Mordian Glory Discord server, an online community with almost 2,500 active members. It's always popping off in the MG Discord. We've got channels for army lists, hobbying, tactics, stories, and even a pretty spicy meme section as well. For all you greenhorns that wanted to see the Mordian Glory Hole, today is your lucky day. And joking aside, I do want to say a massive thank you to all of the current channel members and patrons. You guys are amazing, truly the lifeblood of the channel. I could not do Mordian Glory full time without the incredible and generous support of my members, so thank you guys so much. And last but certainly not least, I want to say a personal thank you to all of my top tier Patreons. These are the War Masters, the people who have truly gone above and beyond the call of duty. So a heartfelt thank you to Alex Dengal, Bon Vert, Mad Larkin, Marcus Roberts, Mark Panconi, RJ Scorpion, Swordfish Trombone, Try Again Bragg, John Stubbs, Nick Walsh, Diesel Fox, and August Barney. Seriously guys, thank you from the bottom of my heart. Your support is incredible and it makes a huge difference. Thank you so much. That's all for now. Hope you've all enjoyed today's video, and of course, as always, see you guys next time.